Next up, we are looking at identifying cost-effective compute and database services. Starting with compute, there are multiple different pricing options for Amazon EC2 that you should be comfortable with for the exam. There is on-demand, reserved, dedicated, and spot pricing for EC2 instances. Then there are also savings plans, which apply to not only Amazon EC2 instances, but can apply to other compute services as well. Each of these pricing models has different impacts on costs and are best used under specific scenarios. You should be comfortable with each of them. Let's go over an example. Let's say you are trying to figure out which pricing model is best suited for a compute workload that is consistent in usage over time, with some spikes in usage throughout the day, but it never really falls below a certain level of usage. What pricing model would be the most cost-effective for this scenario? On-demand, reserved, or spot? For this one, I would pick reserved instances because I know there is a certain level of consistent usage over time, and I can get discounted billing rates for this consistent usage using reserved instances. You can also use on-demand instances to serve the surges of usage, and then use spot to serve the very peak of usage, which doesn't last for very long. This is a blended approach for pricing, which would give you a cost-optimized approach to scaling your workload. Having a good understanding of the impact on cost each Amazon EC2 pricing model has can help you be prepared for the exam. It's also important to remember that reserved instances can also be used for Amazon RDS database instances, which can further cost optimization. Beyond the pricing models for EC2, you should consider the instance size and family for cost optimization. The idea of right sizing means that you select an instance type that meets your workload's demands, and then you pick a size for the instance that is appropriate. This requires that you have monitoring in place so that you can see how much utilization your instances have over time. And if you see that you have a very low utilization of these instances, you have the option to change them to be smaller instance sizes, which would save you money on your AWS bill. The idea of right-sizing resources goes for compute and databases, as some database services allow you to select an instance size, like Amazon RDS, for example. Another way to optimize for costs for compute and databases is to select appropriate scaling strategies given a scenario. For example, you could have a database that is experiencing performance issues due to high CPU utilization, where there are periods of heavy read requests hitting the instance. In order to scale up, you could increase the instance size. This, however, would increase the cost associated with the database. Therefore, in order to optimize for cost, you could instead consider adding a read replica or some sort of cache to help absorb some of the read requests and offload the requests from the database instance. This would allow you to meet performance demands while also optimizing for costs, because introducing a read replica can often be more cost-effective than scaling up the database instances. You could also right-size storage for an Amazon RDS database by using storage autoscaling. Making these sorts of decisions around scaling require that you have a deep knowledge of the different scaling mechanisms that exist for both AWS database services and AWS compute services. So if you have gaps here, I would recommend reading the documentation for the relevant services. Another way to optimize for cost is to select the correct database service for your use case. Depending on your use case and usage patterns, it may be more cost-effective to use Amazon Aurora Serverless over Amazon Aurora, for example. It all depends on the use case, so it's important that you know each database and its use case as well. Now, one last tip for cost optimization for compute and databases is to use managed services when possible. In the cloud, managed services remove the operational burden of maintaining servers for tasks like running applications or managing databases. And because managed services operate at cloud scale, they can offer a lower cost per transaction or service. This means you should consider using managed services like AWS Fargate for containers, AWS Lambda for serverless compute, or Amazon DynamoDB for a database. Even for services that may cost a little bit more on your AWS bill, these managed services free up your DBAs and system administrators to focus on your core business and development, like backup and recovery, instead of spending their time on the day-to-day operations of keeping the solution running. That is a wrap on this topic, and I'll see you soon.